So if you're going to take any exam from B1 and upwards, B1, B2, C1, C2, at any Escuela Oficial de Idiomas, you will have to take an exam called mediation. You may be unfamiliar with what that is, so I'm going to try and explain what we understand by mediation and what you are expected to do in those mediation tasks in your exam. In languages, we talk about mediation when there is some sort of problem, an obstacle, or there is some information missing that one of the speakers has or one of the speakers understands and the other doesn't. So the person who understands would be the mediator. So in the exam, you will have to be the mediator. So in a case like this, for example, imagine that you are this person here. You are here safe. In this case, you have the information, but your friend does not have the information. So there is a sort of information gap. So you help him or her by providing that information. And probably when you give him or her that information, you're not just reading or doing something. You are adapting the information for him to understand. For example, another problem might be if you're here, you have already jumped onto the other side. Imagine, for example, that the other person can read the text or can listen to the information, but it's too difficult for them. So you somehow use more simple language, use simpler vocabulary for that person to understand. So basically, all the mediation tasks, when you work as a mediator, what you have to do is help people who have some sort of problem or some obstacle in communication. In our everyday lives, we are mediating all the time. For example, when you watch a film or a TV show and you tell your friends about the main plot, about what's happened in the film or TV show. So you are mediating because you have that information and they don't. For example, when you receive a text message or you talk to somebody on the phone and then you tell somebody else about that conversation, you report that information on those conversations or text messages, then you are mediating for those other people. Or if you see something on social media, if you see someone you know or a classmate posting pictures of a trip he's taken or she's taken, and then you summarize that information and you tell your friends about what you've seen on that social media. You're mediating for those people. Mediating is actually what teachers do all the time. Teachers have some information, know more things or know things that you don't. So teachers explain to students. So they are mediating that information, and they are not just repeating information. They are making it easy for you to understand. So that is another of the roles of a mediator. A mediator has to make it easy for the other person to understand. Many times, probably, you are doing it yourselves. When you explain something to one of your classmates or one of your friends, maybe because they missed a lesson or maybe because they don't understand it, you explain from your notes, you explain that to your classmate or your friend using your own words, and again, making it easy for your classmate to understand. So this is mediation. This is a more theoretical perspective of what mediation is. Sometimes you mediate text, you have information in a text. Sometimes you mediate concepts, especially when you are collaborating in a group. And sometimes you mediate communication and culture. There are some cultural aspects that people from different countries or different cultures may not understand, or maybe people of a different age. Maybe language teenagers use may not be understood by older people. In in the exam, I have to tell you what you will have to do. You will have to mediate text. You will get a text in the mediation in writing section, and you will have to maybe transmit that information. You will have to process text, that is, create a new text saying or transmitting that information in a different way. These are the most typical kind of tasks you will have to do in an exam. Maybe you might have to explain data that you might find in graphs, in diagrams. I don't think this is going to happen at B1 level, but it is a possibility, okay? I don't think in the exam, I don't think you will have to do this because you will be mediating alone, so probably not that. And in the exam, probably there won't be many cultural aspects. Maybe that situation, maybe you will have to act as an intermediary in informal situations, maybe. But definitely what you need or what you may expect in the exam is to mediate text and transmit, relay, as they call it, specific information and process text, change somehow the text into something else for the other person to understand. Mediation might happen in the same language. Imagine, for example, you get a text in English, but it is very long or there are some complicated expressions, so you make another text in English, but it is a shorter text and with simpler vocabulary. So that would be mediation in the same language. And this is what you will have to do in the mediation in writing part of the exam. Okay? Mediation can also take place between different languages, what they call cross-linguistic mediation. For example, if you read a text in Spanish and you want to mediate that into English for somebody who can't understand Spanish, for example. So this is what you will have to do in the mediation in speech. So in your speaking test, as part of your speaking test, you will have to carry out this cross-linguistic mediation from a text in Spanish into English. Mediation is not exactly translation. You may have to translate something, but definitely it is not literal translation. Definitely not. Try and use your own words, and definitely the words that the other person is going to understand, because you want to be helpful for the other person. Some people cannot see really the distinction between interaction and mediation. Let me illustrate it with these pictures. When you are interacting, when you are in a conversation and there is what we call an interaction, the different speakers have different interests. Imagine, for example, you and your friend are discussing going to the cinema and you have to decide what film to watch. If you are discussing this, you and your friend will possibly have different interests, and maybe you want to watch an adventure movie and your friend wants to watch a romantic movie. So you are somehow, this is what we call in English a tug of war. You are pulling in different directions. So in this game, you know, this group of people are pulling one way and these other people are pulling the other way. So this is what happens when you are discussing this. You want the adventure film, your friend wants the romantic film. So somehow you have to negotiate. You have to find an agreement in the end, or maybe not. Ideally, you will reach an agreement. But this is what you do in an interaction. But both of you have different interests. However, when you are mediating, what you want is irrelevant. You have no interest here. What you are doing is helping your partner. So this is your friend or your classmate or whatever, and this is you helping them and thinking of what they need to understand the text, to get that information. Your interests don't matter. You get nothing. You get no profit out of it. You are simply helping them. So, with all this in mind, these are the strategies you will have to use in the exam. Basically, in the mediation in writing part of the exam, you will read a text. So, what you will have to do is summarize, that is, describe the main ideas of a text for your friend to get the gist, the essence, the summary of a text. Okay? Then, possibly in the exercise, it will tell you to select some of the most relevant points of a text. Perhaps in the mediation in speech, in the speaking part of mediation, you might get an infographic with, for example, top 10 tips for something. So, possibly the exercise will tell you, select some of the most relevant points. You won't have time to talk about all of them, so you have to select the ones which would be important or interesting for your friend and talk about those. Finally, another strategy you will have to use is rephrasing, that is, using your own words and adapting the language for your friend to understand. Maybe there are expressions that you understand, but your friend won't. Or maybe they have a very complicated sentence and you want to make it into a simpler sentence, into an easier sentence. So this is what you have to do as a mediator. These are then the strategies: summarizing, selecting some of the interesting points, and using your own words. Probably the exercises, the mediation tasks, will start with something like this. Maybe it will say, your teacher or your boss has asked you to explain blah blah to a friend, to a classmate, to a colleague. Maybe you've been talking to your Dutch correspondent. If you have a school exchange, your correspondent is the person you swap, you visit in the home and they stay in your home when they come here. So, for example, you've been talking to your Dutch correspondent or to your Norwegian or German correspondent and they don't understand, blah, 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 whatever. Or your language assistant at school can't understand why, blah, 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 so you need to explain to them. Or maybe you have seen this ad or you have seen this infographic and you think your friend may be interested in it. So you summarize the main ideas, you select the relevant points, and you use your own words for your friend to understand the text. A bit later, in another video, I will give you some examples of both tasks for mediation in writing and mediation in speech. So remember, if you want to be a good mediator, you should select the relevant information, relay it, transmit it, say it appropriately, but basically think of what the other person needs. It is true that in the exam you won't have the other person to see their reaction, to see if they understand or they don't. But from the context of a task, if they tell you your friend can't understand any Spanish or their English is not very good, or of the interests they might describe in the exercise. So think of what the described friend may need. As an idea, if you want to practice with a friend, you may read a short text that your friend hasn't read, and then you can summarize it so that your friend will know what it is about. You can do the same with a clip from a TV show, from a film, or from a YouTube video, for example. So watch it and then summarize it for your friend to know what the video was about. So that would be real life mediation. It's not exactly what you will have in the exam, but at least it will give you an idea of what mediation is. If you want to know more about the structure of the mediation exam at the Escuelas Oficiales de Idiomas, and if you want to watch and access sample tasks, examples of tasks and exercises similar to the ones in the exam, please keep watching the following videos.